Hello guys, we are a little bit early today, but we wanted to get started because we all kind of have a couple things we got going on here today. So welcome back for another episode of Crypto Convos. This is a segment created to get to know content creators in the space a little bit better. Today I have Forrest on from the YouTube channel Hashoshi. Welcome and thank you for coming on.
Awesome, thanks for having me. Super stoked.
So give us some background information on who you are and kind of how you got into the space.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been in the space for a while. I know a lot of people talk about their genesis story getting into crypto. I think for me, I read the Satoshi white paper like end of 2009, early 2010, and I fell in love with it. I thought it was such a cool technology because at the time I loved computer science and I loved economics. And then I started doing development work in open source, just playing around. And now today, I'm a full-time blockchain developer in industry and loving every second of it.
That's very cool. Yeah, I definitely didn't read the white paper in 2009. I'll tell you that. So I'm a little envious of you that you have such a big head start on me.
It was kind of an accident, though. That's the
really?
thing. I stumbled across it on StumbleUpon and found it that way. It's pretty wild.
That is really wild. StumbleUpon. Oh, that website, man. I used to use that all the time. I loved that website.
Yeah, in high school.
Yeah, StumbleUpon and Formspring were my like OGs.
Yeah.
But so how long after that did you decide to start making content? And I guess why? Why is always the $1 million question.
Yeah, I think for me, I had tried to explain the same topics to family and friends over and over again because they would ask me like, hey, I know you do this for a living. What is it? Can you explain it to me? Is it only for criminals? All the same questions constantly, right? Of course. And so I thought, okay, well, rather than explaining the same thing, I'll create videos about the basic stuff. They can all watch it. Then we can have, real educated conversations as adults about it. And then it sort of became something that I really enjoyed doing. And I found more people started watching it. And the rest was history. Just started making videos now the last 4 months that I really enjoy making that are in my wheelhouse as a developer and less the content that I thought people wanted to see.
Sure.
And that's really when stuff started taking off for me. So super thankful for that.
Yeah, that's really great that you found something that you actually enjoy doing and also people want to see or hear about it, right? That's like ultimately the goal. I found that when I stopped caring a little bit, I went through a phase in the beginning, I didn't care at all and I did what I wanted. And then for a little while there, I was definitely kind of trying to tailor my content to what I thought people wanted to see. And it wasn't as successful. And now I'm back to just like not caring. And because of that, I find I'm at least happier. And obviously not doing stuff for the views is kind of important too, because you got to enjoy it.
Yeah, especially now. I mean, the views sometimes don't come even if the content's great. And that's part of it because not everything does well. And,
especially in this
live
market.
To fight another day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Views have totally dropped off for me, and I've seen for other people too, because I think right now it's just a lot of the same crypto people that have been here that are still here, like kind of circulating. I don't necessarily think there's any really new people coming in yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, still very few.
Yes. So how long from start to finish does it normally take you to actually make a video?
It depends. So I've been doing, the series that's been really popular that I never miss every single week. Or of course I say that, and today I'm traveling, so I'm missing it tonight. But is a Token Talk Tuesday series, and those videos are usually pretty long. Sometimes they get up close to 40 minutes long.
Oh wow!
But it's just a deep dive from a technical perspective and from just an overarching vision perspective of what certain projects are all about.
Okay.
So touching on the architecture, how it's built, the team. How the consensus mechanism works, what the token value is driven by, that sort of thing. It's like not even close to related to trading. It's all about the platform itself. And those take me hours to make because I do a lot of research. I write a lot beforehand. I write like a long form blog post and then recording. I mean, sometimes those things take me like 7-8 hours to make over the course of a week.
I believe it.
But yeah, I love making them. They're a lot of fun. I learn a lot along the way.
Yeah, I experienced kind of the same thing, and I think that's part of the reason I always do not always, but I try to pepper in bloopers here and there is because originally when I started, I don't think anyone had any idea how much work it was to create these review videos, so much in-depth information, and then on top of it, trying to find like visual aids and stuff to add into it. So
yeah,
I can only imagine what a 45-minute video would take me, so I commend you because that's remarkable.
It takes a long time, but I think people, even if they don't watch the whole thing, they can skip through and find the part that they want to watch.
Sure.
And I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Well, that's good though. So you said you have a background in economics, and what else? Did you go to school for this kind of stuff?
So economics was always just a passion of mine. I always liked it. I always read books about it. I was like a reader as a kid. And I went to school for software engineering and business together.
Okay.
And so that's why I came out into industry really wanting to do something with crypto and blockchain and not knowing how I was going to do it, because I thought no one's ready for this yet.
Yeah.
Unless I started something on my own, which, of course people can do. But it really worked out. It surprised me. The industry was ready for people to start building this stuff, and it took off almost about the same time. So it's awesome.
That's good luck and good timing, right? I think like that seems to be the consensus for a lot of us in this space, is like, that's kind of the way I felt in a minor form. I'm like, is it really going to be worth it for me to make videos? Like, but I'm like the opposite. There was already so many people doing it. I'm like, is there really a space, like a need for this? And then, it kind of was successful. So I guess it's just about diving in, right? And just at least testing the waters.
Yeah. And for me, it's funny, like every time I create content, like I know myself that I know the core concepts and I know how to learn in the crypto space.
Sure.
But every time I create content, I get that that anxiety, like posting the video, like, what if I mess this one thing up in this 40 minutes of content? And so that's been a new exercise for me, just being like, you know what, just post it. People will tell you if you're wrong, and you can handle that and learn from it. So
yeah, I'm definitely wrong pretty often, but I have no problem owning up to that. And more recently, the news video I did where I kind of called out Binance, I got it was the first time on any of my content I really got a lot of negative feedback, and I kind of had a sneaking suspicion that was going to happen. So I definitely experienced the same anxiety. But like you said, it's one of those things where you really just got to embrace it, realize that you can't please everybody all the time. I mean, if you can please a small percentage of people once in a while, you're doing pretty good, so.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff's like, it's the opinion, some of the video that I do is just the fact, like that's what's out there. And it's really hard to debate those. But then there's some things where you're contributing your opinion, and I encourage people to disagree with me because that's part of the space. I mean, to an extent, there are people who take it way too far, and I talk about that a lot on the channel and on live streams, like the negativity and like the hate that goes on. That's too much, but disagreement is totally fine, and I'm happy for it.
Yeah, I feel the same way too. I don't really mind necessarily disagreeing, but it's like when people become offensive for like no reason, or very tribalist, which we'll see too. But I think that the reason I didn't experience as much, like you said in the beginning, is because I was just doing facts. It was a lot less of opinions, and people started asking for my opinion. So I started putting it in, and then that kind of led to, well, now there's like it's a hung jury. People either love it or they don't.
Yeah. I mean, people themselves are just black and white. I mean, I'm that way. Everyone's that way. It's like you either love something or you hate something. You have to try not to be.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
So what exactly do you do as far as development goes? Like, I guess, like, what's your day to day? Are you in crypto full time?
Yeah, full time. Pretty much my entire life is crypto and blockchain related, which I'm happy for. I think that's the most anyone can ask for. Even when job, like work gets stressful, YouTube wise, even it makes sense because I know this stuff and this is what I like doing. But yeah, my full time, my day to day, I'm a DApp developer, so I build applications. I started to do full stack development, front end, middleware, back end, blockchain, smart contracts, all that stuff. And it's really challenging at times. I think
I believe it.
Especially because even though you've built something before, the next time you build something, let's just say 2 months later with the same platform, everything that you did before might not work the same way because things have changed.
Yeah.
And so every time you build something, it's like a new learning curve, or you have to use a new tool that you haven't used before that works differently. So it's constantly learning, constantly adjusting and adapting to new stuff, especially when you're not doing like core development. I'm not building the Ethereum platform or protocol, which is way over my head, but I'm taking what these folks are giving us and trying to build apps that people want to use.
So is the difference in developmental tools and things changing just the nature of the space, or is that how it is normally?
I think it's a little of both. It's
Okay.
how it is normally for open source software and stuff that's rapidly changing in general, like being iterated on and building. Because it's crypto, because the space is
Sure.
nascent, stuff's getting built a lot faster, and those new builds and new things come out faster. Like for example, Truffle, one of the big tools that people use to develop and test applications using Ethereum. They've had a lot of big releases over the last year that changed a lot of stuff, and so you have to learn the way that those new tools work.
Yeah.
I mean, the documentation, if the documentation's there, it's an easier time, but not all projects have great documentation, obviously.
Yeah,
So
for sure. It's funny
yeah,
too, from my perspective, those are never things that cross my mind. Like, oh, do they have the documentation for developing on the platform? It's never been a concern of mine because it's never really affected me. So it's funny to think that there's so many different facets, right? Like I look for a white paper, I look for people
yeah,
meeting their deadlines, I look for people engaging with their community and marketing well and things like that. And meanwhile, you're looking for literally the opposite
yeah,
of everything I'm looking for, which is really cool, which is why I wanted to talk to you, because not only have I really never had like a one-on-one with a developer, but also I think it's important for the space to see different facets of people, like what we all do.
yeah,
And I think your channel in particular is neat because I don't think that there's a lot of in-depth, like real in-depth development channels out there right now. I mean, is there
yeah.
anybody else doing what you're doing?
I mean, I think Ivan on Tech, his channel, I mean, obviously is huge,
Yeah.
and he comes from a similar background. I think he does a lot of dApp development in the Ethereum space, and I know he has like an online course for smart contract development. So I know he comes from the same background. His channel, obviously, he can do a lot a lot of different
Yeah.
types of content because he has that base. So I mean, he's a channel that I've sort of modeled my approach after. It's
Sure.
like, this is my wheelhouse. I know this particular stuff, so I'm going to create content that helps amplify that. Because I'm not a trader, and I mean, besides when you go and you buy Bitcoin, like I don't do the trading thing. I don't do technical
Yeah.
analysis, and that stuff's just not my thing. So I leave that to other people who like doing that because I personally don't. And then people can go to another channel for that. So
Yeah.
I've stopped trying to speak about trading besides the fundamental stuff, like how to evaluate a project based on the raw facts about what's going on.
Yeah, so I agree with you, and I've told the story 1,000 times, but I started trading when I originally got into crypto. When I realized I couldn't mine, I was like, okay, I'll trade.
Yeah.
Boy, was that a miserable decision. Not a good trader, and I think that there's some truth behind it, I think, but for me, it was just not my thing, and I would have never made a channel about that because that would have been a mess.
Yeah. I mean, I think people just like, I understand the temptation. I think my first handful of videos, I like looked back at it. I look back at it all the time. My first few videos, like the first three were like the ones for my family, like what is blockchain, just to tell you what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other ones were like, crypto investing related or like news videos and stuff like that. And it made sense. I was trying to sort of ride trends or what people would click and what people would care about. But it's just not stuff that I really liked talking
Yeah,
about.
of course.
So it didn't have the same impact.
You also have to figure out what makes sense, right? So obviously you have a niche skill and you should be utilizing that for people that don't. So,
Right.
and that was the thing for me. I mean, the reason I started my channel was because there was just a lack of entry level information. I'm not a developer. I don't have a tech background. I didn't go to school for this stuff. It's all me just sitting down and reading a bunch of crap, basically. And I wish that there was more stuff that I do, even now today, because it's like, it's still sometimes really hard for me to get to the bottom of something if I don't understand like the real deep technical aspects of something.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of content need for that. I think especially when the good news is that all that content, it's evergreen. Like people will come to that content even if it's 3 years old and still be able to understand the fundamental stuff. Like, should I use a hardware wallet? Obviously, yes.
Yeah.
Here's why, right?
And here's how you do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, you develop mainly on Ethereum, is that correct?
Yeah, I've done most of my work on Ethereum over the past, I would say, 6 months maybe.
Okay.
I've tried to expand and do work with other platforms. So I built something really small with Tron, and that was a pretty eye-opening experience. I did that video. Obviously, there's a huge like disparity between people who love or hate Tron. I'm not really sitting there making that. I didn't sit there on that video and make that determination. I said, here's what it does. Here's my experience. Take that for what you will. Cardano is another one. Their Plutus smart contracts platform came out, their new virtual machine. I've tested smart contracts built in Solidity for Ethereum that are deployed on Cardano, and then also played with Plutus. Stuff like that. I'm trying to do more platforms and add to my knowledge and skill set, but mostly Ethereum for now.
I really think that that's important for the average person to have someone like you be like, okay, I developed something small on like these 6 platforms. Let me tell you like what their pros and cons are. If they're the things that they're publicizing, they can do if they can do that, right? So, because the average person looking at code and stuff like that is not going to have any idea of what they're promising is an actuality.
Yeah, and I think the experience as a developer, and I'm not saying like, could someone who has the relative technical capability of like Vitalik Buterin go in without documentation, dive into a GitHub repository and figure out how to build something? Probably, it's likely, but I think most people need some robust documentation about what's there so they can build something, because that's just a standard thing you expect.
Sure.
And so I really look at documentation. If a project has good documentation and I'm able to spin something up like a test application quickly, that's points for me, because that is not always there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd imagine that would be a big pro. Before I move on, this is a question that I didn't have written down, but I got to ask. So how's developing on Cardano? What's the deal with that? Is it easier, difficult? Do they have good documentation?
So there are 2 sides to it.
Okay.
It's easy from the perspective of the documentation in their playground. They have that new Plutus playground and a lot of documentation associated with it. So that is great. The language that they've implemented for Plutus, it's called Haskell. That's a language that I've never used before prior to this. So I've been trying to learn Haskell as I'm learning to use this new platform. So that's been a little slow for me because it's so different from what I'm used to. But from the perspective of the actual platform, it's pretty easy. And for me, I'm very disorganized. So I like having single stream code. So all of the contract and the back end, the business functionality can be written in the same file for different functions in Plutus, which is different than most places. So that's pretty cool.
That is cool. That's good to know too. So why Ethereum?
Why Ethereum? I think Ethereum, for the longest time, had the best documentation and the best community in terms of learning to develop things. Early on, I think when I actually started taking it seriously and I wanted to build something that actually worked, that wasn't just me fiddling around with smart contracts and creating something to make my own ERC20 token, stuff like that. I wanted to build an application. I went and got a couple of Udemy courses and went through those, and I learned so much stuff from them. And then after a while, I ended up getting Ethereum certified through Consensus, which was also fantastic.
That's cool.
So I learned a lot from that. But there's so many free resources too. Like, you don't have to go and pay for things. There are like Hacker Noon articles and Medium articles that teach almost everything you could possibly want to know about it. So that's part of the reason. It's just easier to learn Ethereum.
Yeah.
And the skills that you learn there apply across a ton of platforms. I mean, you can build a good, solid Solidity contract that's relatively secure. That skill applies in a lot of places, for sure.
It's good to know. So someone's got a question in the chat. How do you get Ethereum certified?
So there are a handful of places that do it. Consensus, the company, they have a developer program that opens up, I think, once or twice a year, and it's like a course and then a final project. And then there's another company called B9 Labs, and they have one that's similar. And then there are a handful of other websites. I can send all these to you so that you can maybe shoot them out in like a community post or something.
Yeah, for sure.
But there are a handful of websites that do these courses, and you can get certified.
Oh, that's good to know. I didn't even know that was a thing, Ethereum certified.
Yeah, I mean, and to an extent, it's, you have a company that's saying you're certified.
Yeah.
It's not like there's no, like, the Ethereum Foundation isn't saying, yeah, you're Ethereum certified. But I guess it's the same as getting another industry cert. You're
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
trusting
I mean,
somebody.
it's something you can say, right? And it
Yeah.
brings up conversation about just like this, like what is it? How does it work? How do you get it? So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what do you think Ethereum's biggest strengths and weaknesses are? I mean, there's been a lot of chat about the fact that, their newest updates getting pushed back again, and there's all these other issues. So, what's your thoughts on all that?
I think their biggest strength for sure is the community. And I think even though people deny it a lot, they have a lot of really strong talent and brain behind the platform. I mean, I know that Vitalik says weird stuff sometimes and, whatever, but he's no dummy. And I think he has a really good vision for what Ethereum should be. Whether or not they can get it there quickly enough, that's the big question.
Yeah.
So I think they're in a really unenviable position, though, because you have a lot of people who use Ethereum, even though, yes, you can say, CryptoKitties and all that stuff doesn't count. It does. People still use that stuff. And as a developer, I want them to be careful about breaking the entire Ethereum network because I rely on that for my own stuff. So they can't just go in there and say, hey, well, no one uses this, so we can do a hard fork that could potentially blow everything up totally. They have to be very careful about it.
But no worries.
So I think that's one of the hard parts is balancing taking their time and building something that can go into a hard fork and really work and bring it quickly enough for people to not freak out because it's taking too long.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I actually never really thought about it from that perspective. Not to mention, I mean, they want to do it once and have it be correct because then the last thing they want to do is have something fail and then people lose faith in the platform and in the development team, and that's just not good. So
the community, in my opinion, for Ethereum cannot afford another catastrophic failure. I mean, I wouldn't even call it a hack because the DAO hack was not actually a hack per se. It was a stupidly built smart contract. But the fact of the matter is, like this Constantinople upgrade, that opened the door for a potential next level DAO hack for contracts that weren't prepared for that move because of the way that they modified the economics of gas. So it's very hard to predict how these things are going to happen and when they're going to happen. So that's not an easy spot to be in for anybody.
Yeah, and I mean, not to mention, anytime that there's human involvement in something, there's an opportunity for human error, right? So like with the DAO contract, it's not a good representation of how a DAO can be built, and it can be built properly, or it's still something that's created by a human and can have errors and cause exactly what happened.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, because it's somebody else has a question and it's going to change the topic, so.
Okay, cool. One last thing. I think even every time I built a smart contract, I have to go in there and I modify it dozens of times before I get through to the what is close to the final implementation because there's always little loopholes and things and like gotchas within Solidity that you have to be aware of. And I'll have friends look at it, I'll have colleagues look at it, whatever, because getting another set of eyes on it is the most valuable thing.
Yeah, I mean,
for Solidity.
It's in a very loose comparison, it's like the same thing with having somebody copy edit work, right? So I'll write it, somebody has to look at it, then ideally a third person looks at it because after a while you're looking at something and you don't see the errors, they could be right in front of you and it's just something that you're not recognizing. So it's always important to have someone sort of like, proofread basically.
Yeah.
So the question is, would you start again with Ethereum programming or would you choose another platform now that there are so many more options?
Good question. If I were you, I would still start with Ethereum. I would get really, really solid at Solidity, smart contract development, and become intimately aware of the flaws and the potential areas by which you can get into trouble with it. There are a lot of great articles out there. There's great documentation about reentrancy hacks, integer underflow, overflow, all these different things that happen in contracts that can leave you vulnerable to losing money or leave your users vulnerable to losing money or data being exposed. So I would still start there because if you wanted to then go build for another platform, a lot of them use a permutation of the Ethereum virtual machine. And even if they don't, the same contract language and paradigms still apply in a lot of those ways.
That's good to know. I find that interesting that that's still your answer, which kind of gives me, because Ethereum was my first love. I got into crypto when it was like $17, and that's when I first started buying it. And so to me, it was always like like everyone has that one crypto that they got involved with that's, made them happy or made them money or whatever. And I always had faith in the project, mostly because I think Vitalik is a genius. But it's nice to know that if given the opportunity, you would probably still build on them, because that just makes me feel more secure in my decision.
I would still do it again. And look, like, there's so much more to building an application with the blockchain than just building a smart contract. Like, you can build a smart contract and it can be really dope, but if you don't have like a whole robust amount, like bunch of APIs that can talk to a front end, you might need off-chain storage in some cases. So you need to get IPFS involved or MongoDB involved. There's a lot more to it than that. So if you're a developer already and you have like mean stack experience or something like that, you should just get at least familiar with Solidity so that you can start working on these apps, even if you don't want to do the smart contract stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Do other platforms use Solidity?
Yeah. So Tron, as people are probably going to say, a lot of the code for it, the EVM, is rip and replace early on from Ethereum, and still uses Solidity contracts and a lot of the same opcodes and functions. They've modified a lot of stuff now. But platforms like that, there's also still a compiler and a virtual machine on Cardano that uses Solidity too. So you can use Solidity on a lot of different platforms. And,
I'm not surprised by that, actually.
Yeah, because I mean, it really was the first one.
Yeah.
And once people started learning it, they're like, what's the best for adoption? Should we keep creating new languages over and over again, or do we just use the same one?
Yeah, so that's actually a question I wanted to ask you. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, because there are all these languages, right? There's all these different platforms. Ultimately, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, you're trying to learn Haskell, you're trying to learn all these other languages, and obviously it's slowing you down, right? So in a perfect world, what do you think would solve that problem?
I mean, I think interoperability is always good, but I think if you look back at the history of software, there's so many languages out there, you can't possibly know them all, like inside and out. So you find the ones that you really like that make the most sense to you syntactically, because everyone thinks differently. And people are like, I can't program, or I can. It's not like that. It's you can program no matter who you are. It's just there's a certain language, a certain thing that you can do because your brain works a certain way. So if you like doing web development, then do that. If you like Haskell and Python and you don't like JavaScript, then do the things you like. So I think to an extent, we can't just keep creating new languages for the heck of it. But I think if there's a real need to use a new language for the platform's adoption, I say go for it.
Your comparison to coding languages and real languages was very good. That's just another thing I definitely didn't. It's like stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, and I definitely never thought of it that way.
Yeah, because I start like in school, I started trying to learn French. I'm like, this sucks. I cannot learn French. I went to do Spanish, and it made sense to me.
Yeah,
they're very similar in the core, reasoning and some of the core grammar, but I was better at Spanish, so I stuck with that.
Yeah, it's a good comparison. So are there anything coming up in the near future as far as like project updates or upgrades or anything that you think are important to you that you are looking forward to?
I think this Constantinople upgrade try number 2 is going to be very interesting to see. I'm gonna say here that my prediction is that we do see it go into effect. I don't think it's very contentious. But I also do think that people, after Constantinople, the pressure's on to start delivering features inclusive of the preliminary stuff for proof of stake. I think it's already clear we're not going full proof of stake for a good while. But if we can start moving in that direction this year, I think people will be very happy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a plus that you think that maybe this time around it'll actually get implemented. I just want to see, this is the implementation that would make it proof of stake, right?
So this is the implementation that's setting the stage for some of that. So they're delaying the difficulty bomb, which was what was supposed to already, like months ago, make it so costly to keep using proof of work that miners would have to use proof of stake instead.
Got it.
So they keep delaying that. They're delaying it another 12 months, I think. So that right there says, like, we're not going full proof of stake for at least another year, if not way longer than that. But I think on the other side of that, this is bringing the the stepping stones that they need to make it reasonable to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm frustrated too. I love Ethereum, but I'm obviously frustrated that this stuff's taking so long. And I'm just going to remain positive and hopeful that what they come up with is going to work really well and it's going to be game changing, because that's the hope.
Fingers crossed, right? I mean, that would ultimately be the best case scenario. It's implemented smoothly, it does what it's supposed to do, and then it allows for further upgrades and stepping stones for all the other things that they said they were going to do.
Yeah, I mean, they have one chance. That's the reality.
Yeah.
They can't put something out that sucks and that doesn't work, because as soon as people abandon and lose faith, like you said before, it's all over. You're not gonna. This space is too nascent, and there are too many other people that can take attention away. They have to nail it.
Yep, I agree with you. So I got one more question for you, because I know you got to run.
Sure. No worries.
I'm trying to figure out which one I want to do most. I guess,
I can do two.
All right. So what's the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome when you started making content? And then what would be your favorite and least favorite things about making content?
Gotcha. So the biggest hurdle for me was
like learning curve or whatever.
Yeah, I think I already had background in like videography and editing and that sort of thing, so that was fine. But I think for me, it was wanting to put myself out there for the purpose of putting myself out there.
Sure.
Like being able to post a video and not like be freaked out that, hey, I'm putting my knowledge out there and people might say this or say that. I think it was a great growth opportunity for me to just not care if people hated it or people liked it.
Yeah.
And just be okay with it either way. That was the biggest hurdle. I think just the anxiety involved with it.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, yeah. And then my most favorite thing about content, I think, is learning from the community. Whenever I post one of these 40-minute videos, even though I've gone through and I've talked about so much stuff, people come in and say, hey, at minute 36 in the video, you said this, like I can elaborate on that, or minor correction. I learned so much from those videos alone that it's awesome. So whenever people comment, watch, and I look at the stats and see how many minutes of people's lives that have been devoted to watching my stuff, it blows me away every time I look at it.
It's very humbling.
Truly, because I realize, I mean, time is super valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
My least favorite thing, I think, is probably when people like fight with each other for like no actual reason. Like I'm actually cool, and I encourage people to argue on the merit of a project. Like, hey, I did this analysis and I think that it's terrible for these reasons, and then someone going back and saying I disagree with those reasons. But as soon as it starts going into like name calling, like personal attacks, like weird stuff that's just irrelevant to the entire thing, or like character questioning, or saying it's a scam, period, like that bothers me.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Just trolling.
For sure. And it's not even like when it's directed towards me. Like when it's directed towards me, I handle it in my own way. But it's like when someone else is getting, attacked viciously for what is, to me, virtually no reason, that bothers me. And it happens. I mean, it happens all over the place.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. Those are all good pros and cons, I'd have to say, and I definitely agree with you 100%. So, do you have anything else to add before you run?
Well, one thing to add is thank you very much for having me.
Of course.
Love these type of conversations. We should definitely do another stream. We could talk about the news or something else.
For sure,
whatever,
absolutely. We can get maybe get Kyle on here and get a nice little roundtable going like we did in the past. That was fun. All right, guys.
I'm down for that.
Well, please go follow him on Twitter and on YouTube. I left the links down below in the description. Next week, I think I'm interviewing Michael from Box Binding, so that should be exciting. Yeah, so thank you guys for watching as usual, and I will see you at some point this week, probably.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.